Chapter 18, The Desert. Yeshua then did something extraordinary. He waded to the far side of the river Jordan, and then with the briefest of glances back at all of us gathered on the banks, he lifted his hands in a small wave, and then simply carried on, walking up towards the distant hills. Yohanan came over to me and we stood together silently watching as Yeshua headed away from everything he knew, owned and was. It felt as if the seed that had been buried deep within all of our lives for so many years was finally breaking the surface, and all we could do was watch. I wasn't sure where Yeshua was even going. All I knew was that once he got beyond the hills, there was only desert. Before long, he was gone. I stayed all the rest of the day waiting and watching for him. Soon it was dark. Yohanan suggested I travel back to Nazareth, but I wanted to stay close to where I had watched him depart. Even though Yeshua was now 30 years old, twice the age I had been when I had given birth to him, the ache of motherhood felt strangely stronger than ever. He was a man for sure, and he had travelled much, but still I could not turn my back on him in his time of need. As long as he was in the desert, I would stay by the river and wait. I sent word to Nazareth that no one was worried. One of Yohanan's followers offered me a simple room in the village. I was grateful for the hospitality. I spent the next few days sitting on the banks of the Jordan, looking towards the hills and the desert beyond. I didn't want to leave where I had been when Yeshua had been baptized and I had witnessed the heavens open. I wanted to be here when he returned. This place felt like my strongest connection to Yeshua and to God. Call it a mother's intuition or just a feeling, but I sensed that there was something important he had to do out there alone. I just prayed he would return soon. When we had lost him that time in the temple as a 12-year-old boy, I felt a similar sense of trepidation. The words he spoke when we had finally found him came back to me again and again. I should have known I must be where my father's work is. I was convinced that the same thing was happening now. The desert was right where his father wanted him. Meanwhile, at the river Jordan, Yohanan continued to attract fresh crowds. Each day they grew bigger and bigger as people started hearing about what had happened at the river. I enjoyed listening to his teaching and watching him baptize so many. Elizabeth had left us all broken-hearted when she died some years before, and I hoped that it was comforting to Yohanan to have me there by him, smiling from beneath a shady tree. At first, I didn't mind the waiting. I liked it. It was calm and quiet among the olive trees, and I did a lot of thinking. I thought about why Yeshua had chosen to cross the river Jordan and head into the desert. It reminded me of Moses leading the Israelites through the desert for 40 years. I let myself imagine what it must have been like then to see Moses lead his people out of the wilderness and into their new homeland. How the moment they crossed the Jordan marked the end of their slavery and the beginning of the new life that God himself had promised. After almost a week had passed with no sign of Yeshua, I started to worry. I kept thinking how he had said nothing to any of us about where he was going or why, or how long he would be away for. He had taken no food and barely any water with him. You can't last long in the desert in such heat with no supplies or tools or shelter. I knew that much. So I did what I do best. I prayed. all day for my son. Yet once again, Yeshua did not return. I soon felt maybe I should go home to Nazareth. I told Johanan to send word to me if anyone saw Yeshua. I promised to return to the River Yarden every Shabbat and to keep waiting and praying. But as one more week turned to 2, then 2 to 3, I still heard no news from Johanan, and each time I returned to the Yarden, there was still no sign of Yeshua. How much longer would this be? How much longer could he be? I had a bitter feeling that something was wrong, that Yeshua was in trouble. There were days when I wanted to get up and go into the desert myself to try to find him, to help him, as if an old woman like me could be of use to God's own Son. That thought was futile. There was nothing I could do for Yeshua. The thought was another stab in my heart. When God's voice had filled the sky at Yeshua's baptism, it marked the beginning of his true journey and the end of mine. I would always be his mother, but he ultimately belonged to his Father in heaven. It wasn't easy to accept this.